Reclaiming Catholic Intimacy, formerly Charting Toward Intimacy, covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Sex before marriage was interesting, enticing, exciting, something that we really, really wanted, whether or not you had sex or not. Before marriage, it was something that you anticipated, looked forward to, couldn't wait for, maybe felt like you were ripping each other's clothes off. Again, whether or not you had sex before marriage or not. But now that you are married, that desire for sex isn't there. Maybe between both you and your husband, that desire for sex is significantly lower than when you first got married. Today, we are going to talk about why that is and how you can fix this within your marriage. Welcome to Reclaiming Catholic Intimacy, the podcast for Catholic women that helps you improve your sex life, strengthen your marriage, and embrace God's design for love. My name is Ellen Holloway, and today we are going to talk about why it is that sex before marriage is something that's like super, super, super exciting. And then as we get into marriage, it becomes like less and less exciting. And we are particularly going to talk about this today from the perspective of you and your husband had sex before marriage, realize that was wrong. You have confessed it sincerely. And now you're kind of living with the repercussions of that and experiencing a much lower desire for sex within your marriage. So this episode will definitely apply to you, even if you did not have sex before marriage. But this episode really is, I'm going to be talking about particularly that experience. So why is it that sex is now less interesting? It is because when a couple has sex before marriage, before the covenantal relationship of marriage, before the sacrament, the covenant, the view of sex gets skewed. So sex is speaking the language of love with the body. Sex is literally saying the wedding vows with your body. Saying that I come freely, I come faithfully, I come totally, and that we are allowing this to be fruitful. Those 4 pillars are in the questions before consent at a wedding, at a Catholic wedding ceremony, a Roman Catholic. I don't actually know what Eastern Catholic wedding rites look like, but those questions are in the Roman rite for a wedding. And those questions, they speak to the fact that love is free, total, faithful, and fruitful. And then when the couple comes together in the marital act, they are speaking those words with their bodies, saying, I come to you freely, I come to you totally, I come to you faithfully, and we're allowing this union to be fruitful. When those words are spoken by the body outside of the covenant, it is a lie. The body is saying, I come freely, faithfully, fruitfully, and totally. But that relationship, the covenant, does not yet exist. Lying, if we look at it from a moral perspective and a philosophical perspective, when a person lies, and we can just talk about a simple white lie. Like when you do a simple white lie, the act of lying makes it easier to lie again. Lying begets lying. And so with our bodies, when our bodies are saying something that is not true, that's the lying that I'm talking about here. That lying, right, that speaking an untruth with the body becomes easier. So that is part of the reason, and there's actually quite a bit to this, but that's part of the reason why when a couple has sex before marriage, it is so extremely hard to stop having sex before marriage. It's actually harder in a certain sense than abstaining during marriage. And it's harder to stop than to not ever start at all. Now, when the body is saying an untruth with this act, it is teaching the brain an incorrect understanding of that act. So within a covenantal marriage, within a sacramental marriage, a covenant is for life. Covenant is if I break this, I will die. That's what the covenants are throughout the Old Testament. That's what we can understand covenant to be. In the Old Testament, we have a couple of images of covenants happening where people would walk between, they would take animals and cut them in half and then put them on either sides, and the people who are making the covenant would walk in between the animals. And basically that was saying, if I break this covenant, may I be like those animals. Kind of gruesome. Thank goodness we don't do that in a wedding ceremony. That sounds gross. So within a marriage, when we are speaking the language of love with our body, when we are having sex, when our body is saying, I come to you freely, faithfully, totally, and fruitfully, we are speaking the truth of the sacrament, of the covenant that exists in our relationship. Outside of marriage, right, we've already talked about that it is speaking an untruth. That covenant does not yet exist in the relationship. So it is an untruth. And so what it's doing is it is twisting the meaning of sex. The meaning of sex is an opportunity to speak the language of love, to speak the language of the covenant, to renew the covenant with our spouse, among other things, but hang with me here. When we speak that outside of marriage, it doesn't teach us that truth because that truth isn't there. So what it is then kind of teaching most commonly is that sex is something, that we are getting away with. Sex is something that's secret. It's fun because we're not supposed to do it. Basically, it is teaching our brains that sex is something we're not supposed to do. Now I think you can start connecting the dots as to why, once we get married, the desire for sex has a tendency of disappearing. Because if our brains have been wired that sex is something like secret and that we're not supposed to do and that we get away with, then suddenly when it's something that's allowed, there's very little interest in it because the only thing our brain knows about what sex is, like, we're not going to get that out of having sex with our spouse. So what do we do about this? Because I think we can listen to this and be like, oh my gosh, did I completely ruin myself? Are we completely broken? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. God is the ultimate healer. But what we need to do in this situation is we need to recognize that we have a twisted up idea of what sex is in our brain and that we need to untwist it. And we need to have God untwist it. So what I want to recommend to you is that, first off, share this with your husband. If this was your husband, like if you and your husband had sex before marriage together, share this fact with him. You and your husband need to get on the same page about this and recognize that this is an issue within your marriage. And that part of the reason why sex is difficult in some way is that you both have a twisted up understanding of really what sex is and what sex means. If you are in the situation where maybe you are the only one who had sex outside of marriage, maybe with another partner, then maybe you don't necessarily need to get on the same page with your husband about it. But I'm always a big fan of communication, so I think it's important to share this with him. The second thing that you're going to do is you are going to, with all sincerity, ask for healing, right? We want to recognize that this is an issue, and then we need to ask God to heal it. Bring this to adoration, bring this to mass, make this like your ultimate prayer intention. Another thing I want to recommend is a novena to Our Lady Undoer of Knots. Because what's going on is that the truth about sex is knotted up in your brain. And Our Lady can help and undo those knots. And the novena to Our Lady Undoer of Knots is just so beautiful. And she can help to untwist those things and ask her son to untwist those things for us. So just know that there is hope. But I wanted to share this episode because it can be very confusing. Like, why is this something we wanted so much before marriage and now we don't? And if you are someone who didn't have sex before marriage and you're still listening to this episode, awesome. Thanks so much for listening. If you're someone who didn't have sex before marriage, but you're still experiencing the same thing, right? You really wanted sex before marriage and maybe in those first couple of months, but now we're not wanting it so much. It is the same. It's in a way, it's kind of the same thing, is that your brain has a twisted up understanding of what sex means. And because it was something that was off limits, off the table before marriage, it kind of became this like enticing thing. Even without having sex, It was like, ooh, that's something I can't have, and I want it because I can't have it, right? And that shows us a misunderstanding of the meaning of sex. If we want sex because we can't have it, because it doesn't make sense to want sex outside of a covenantal relationship when we really understand the meaning of sex, in that sex is speaking the language of the covenant, and that is an act that actually doesn't make sense outside of marriage. So as you go from this episode, just remember that you are never completely and totally broken. You are never beyond healing. Jesus is the healer. And when we bring things to the foot of the cross with all sincerity, he will heal them. And this is something that Jesus absolutely will heal for you and your husband. And we just need to ask him, and we need to give it to him, and just give it to him with open hands. Thanks so much for listening. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast, could you do me a favor really quick? Go into the podcast app that you are listening in, and if it gives you an option to rate and review, please rate and review this podcast. It helps us so much in reaching new listeners and spreading the word about this podcast. Thanks so much for listening.